Just gonna go ahead and start. So, intro to sound design. So sound design is something near and dear to my heart. Been doing it for a bit. I started up doing music, and then it was kind of a lot of the tools are the same, so it was kind of a natural progression. So, that being said, here are the goals of my talk. So, I'm going to introduce you to the concept of sound design. I'm going to introduce you to the tools and the techniques to create sounds for your projects. I'm also going to get you excited enough to try and create your own sound effects. Create your own sounds, your own assets, all that shebang. And hopefully, I'm going to make your sounds world. I'm going to make it so that your world sound better. So, here is the big $1,000,000 question. As the slide changes, what is sound design? Well, in practice, it is creating sounds for media. Media being anything that is like a presentation. So plays, TV shows, video games, movies, all that. But why is it important? Actions create sounds. When you hit a light switch, what sound does it make? Click. So, when you have actions in your world, they should be accompanied with sounds. In the world we're in right now, there's a nice bit of sound design. You can hear there's a bit of air conditioner running. If you have your world sounds up, which I recommend you do because I have videos in this presentation, you can hear there's ambiance from the air conditioner. There's action in this world that you understand is happening because you can hear it. Another important thing about sound design is that it's the invisible art. It is a very thankless job. Good sound design is not noticed. It is present, but it does not bring attention to itself. So that being said, I'm going to play a little video. It's from a really popular video game that came out this year. It's a VR game. It has incredible sound design, and I'm going to show you just the beginning, so there won't be any spoilers, but I want you to pay attention and listen to the ambience of the world and how it informs the type of world it is by just listening. Of course, you can watch it and see it happening, but also listen. Pay a little bit more attention and actively listen to what is happening. Alright, so Half-Life Alyx, pretty incredible sound design. You could hear various things, like you can hear that there was birds nearby crowing. You can hear that even though you couldn't see them when you're in the building, you can hear the alien combine. All the vehicles driving by. You can hear your communications device up in the corner bugging you. Hey, you have a message, someone trying to call you. It all informs the world. You can hear your footsteps. You understand what type of floor it is. It informs the world around you. So, let's start from the beginning of what you need to do to make your own sounds. So, tools. Sound design tools. So on the left here, you'll see these are various softwares, and on the right, you have various hardwares. And you may notice, like, hey, I recognize some of this. Audacity, I use Audacity. And like, good on you, Audacity is fantastic. Though, there's a caveat to it. It is not the be-all, end-all. There are many things that Audacity does not have, and I'm going to show you during this talk, like, hey, you might want to try something besides Audacity for this. A lot of my problems with Audacity when it comes to editing have to also do with the workflow. So keep Audacity, it's great. But hey, maybe look into Reaper. Reaper is free to try, and it only costs $60 for non-commercial license. A commercial license is still incredibly cheap. An industry standard one, the one that people use in like movie studios and stuff, is Avid Pro Tools. You can also use Adobe Audition, but I only had like so much room. So you have FL Studio, Ableton, all these digital audio workstations, also called a DAW, are your great resource to actually work your sounds in. And a lot of video editing tools also can do a lot of this too. So, recording. How do you actually record your own sounds? Well, if you don't have anything, you could use your phone. I've personally recorded with my phone and got paid for the sound effects I made that I recorded with my phone. You can use it. It's fine. Don't feel bad about it. But if you want to be a little bit more serious, I recommend picking up a handy recorder. That's actually the same one that I own, but there's a bunch of options. That particular one has built-in microphones. They usually have built-in microphones, so it has an XY pattern, so you can record in stereo, and it captures the room. It's great. It isn't for everything. So on the bottom of it, it has XLR and TRS plugs. TRS stands for tip ring sling. It's your standard like guitar jack or headphone jack, but bigger. You can plug those in. It even supports phantom power for condenser mics and other mics that require phantom power or 48 volts, 24 volts, etc. So you can power microphones. You can use whatever microphone you want, and you record it. It records to an SD card. You can save it for later. But if you don't want to invest in that, you have a USB microphone. I just put a Blue Yeti in, but you can use anything. You can use your headset microphone. You can use that. And then like a great mic, if you're looking to like pick something up, I put in an SM57. That's a great starter microphone. It's used for just about everything. You can use it for like really loud sounds. People use it for like guitar amps. People use it for drums. I've done a lot of sound effect recordings with an SM57. It sounds wonderful. It's only $100. If you could pick up a used one at a garage sale, they've been around since the 60s. Fantastic microphones. So let's delve into the different types of recordings out there. So let's start with like probably the most straightforward one. This is field recording. And I love doing this sometimes, though it's very time consuming. Basically, you go out into the world and you capture it. The basic idea is you have your handy recorder or your laptop with an interface or a microphone, and you just go out and record the world. It is also not an easy way to record sound effects because you have to deal with the entire environment. So you go out and you're going to the woods. You don't know if someone's going to show up and start, for a loud conversation. In fact, it's been kind of a problem for a long time for field recorders that they have to spend a ton of time out in the field just to get a little bit of usable recording. It's tough, but it's fantastic because you get to capture the world as it is, or as I put it, as it proceeds. So yeah, I generally dedicated some dedicated gear. You can see, like in that image there's a handy recorder. They have a microphone there. They're capturing the waves. And you really can't like reproduce. You can reproduce this outside of like field recording, but you really get. I would say this is like compared to what you have to do in other types of recording in production of sound. This is the easiest. It's fine. So the next one is, I think, the most fun for recording, and the one I hope you get to try at some point. Foley. So, yay. Foley is an absolute blast. You just make sounds. But how does it work? Well, you make sounds from objects. And the cool thing about it is it doesn't have to be the object you're trying to record. Yes, hey, I want to get the sound of bone snapping. I guess we're going to go to a trip to the hospital and ask the doctor if we can, hey, we need to, you're going to refix a bone. Can we bring in some microphones? That's too much work. Let's get some like a stick or some like celery. Done. Well, punching sounds. Oh, hey brother, want a fist fight? Nope. Just let's grab a pillow or something and let's record it. It's surprisingly easy, and you don't really need that much. You just need like a microphone. You can have it hooked up to your computer, to a laptop. You can use your iPhone like I did, or your iPhone, and you just do whatever you do. And like you can see in that bottom picture, like they're doing stuff to picture, but it's they have like a whole bunch of tools at their disposal just to make those sounds. They don't have to actually go out and like do it. They don't have to capture everything out when they're filming. It's just they're in the studio having fun, breaking shit. So the next one I think is probably the most difficult one and requires the most amount of knowledge. That's synthesis. So please load. Okay. So this is by creating sounds via a synthesizer. This can be either through a VST on a computer or through a hardware synth. It honestly doesn't matter. I would say if you want to look into this, go and download some like basic free synthesizers. If you already have some, just go and play with the knobs and see what you can create. You can use basically any synth, but some will be more useful than others. If you have like Serum, that's a very popular synthesizer for creating sound effects. But if you want to be really simple, I recommend like using like YMVST or Magical 8-bit to create some, which are free VST plugins. So they work with, I think they're all VSTs. I think Magical 8-bit supports audio units, which is for Apple, like Logic and GarageBand. But you can use this to make 8-bit sounds if you wish. The YMVST is a fantastic Atari synthesizer, so if you want to do like retro sounds, I recommend playing with those. And also you can use them to make music. They are, after all, chiptunes synthesizers. In my picture that I have there, I use one that I use a lot for making retro sounds, which is Massive. It's a made by Native Instruments. And you can use that I use that to make a lot of retro sounds, including instruments. It's literally moving around dials to create your instrument. That's kind of like the basis of like synthesizers. You can create and tune sounds to make an instrument, or it's just sound effects. So there's a lot of overlap between music production and sound design. And I mean, there's a lot of reason for that. They both make sounds. So the next thing is, I think might come a lot of left field for people, is libraries. Did it click? Did it click? Libraries, okay. So I know I'm talking about telling you, like, go make your own sounds, but it isn't always an option. Libraries are a great place to find sounds. So like freesound.org. There's other places that I totally forgetting the name of. Oh, the Sonus GDC bundles. Go search those out. They are these massive libraries of free sound effects that you can download, and they're free. The game audio community makes them every GDC. They come up with a new one, and they're worth downloading. There's a lot, at libraries you're going to find a lot of not great stuff, but it's really honestly better than nothing. And the better you get at like editing and processing, the more useful they'll become. So yeah, as I put my last point there, it's free libraries may require extra work, but it may be worth considering if you're going to be doing a lot of work just to go to like a subscription service for sound effects, because it will save you time. Having to go through and listen to a lot of sound effects, wait for them to load, is very time consuming, as well as making your own sounds. So we've gone through all the processes for actually like getting like sound assets to work with within your DAWs, digital audio workstation DAWs, etc. The next portion I'm going to bring up is editing, which I clicked the next button, but there it goes. So I'm going to break it down into two different categories, which is destructive and non-destructive editing. For those who have a modeling background, I would say think of like Blender and Blender, the Blender. Now I'm totally blanking. The Blender add-ons, like, I'm going to put on the modifiers, Blender modifiers. Okay, Blender modifiers. Think of it like that, but I would say even less destructive than Blender modifiers. So What is destructive editing? It's like when you change the source file or you do like an effect and you like, okay, I need to go back. Do I like spam undo or do I have to reset? Which is actually one of the reasons why I recommend graduating from Audacity, because a lot of the effects that you put on, like you put on like a compression or reverb or amplifier or something, you lose the you have to actually like undo stuff. Whereas when you're working in Reaper or any other DAW, you're putting on VST plugins, and they work in real time. So you can not only you can work and mess with these in real time, you can just bypass them, and you no longer have the effect on them. It's way better than going, okay, I'm going to put this effect on there. It's been edited, and now I can I can set it and forget it, or I can like remember my settings and do it later. It's yeah, no. Destructive. Don't deal with that. So non-destructive, basically, if you can return to where you were originally with just a click or not having to spam undo or just a couple simple steps, that is a non-destructive editing. The next step will be not too far from what we talked about when it came to synthesis, and that's processing. So that is using so you can see in my pictures the guitar pedals. That is like this is literally like using guitar pedals and other types of effects, but you're doing it with sound effects. So for those unfamiliar with this concept entirely, I'm going to describe how an electric guitarist, they have it's amplified. You really can't hear it. So what they do is they take a cord and it plugs into an amplifier. The amplifier feeds into a speaker, that plays the sound. But it's aside from a few options on the amp itself, it is the raw sound of the guitar's pickups. So what do guitar players do? They buy pedals, and they connect a cord to cord of two different effects, and then sometimes they'll split stuff off and then combine it later. But in general, it'll just go through an entire path of effects pedals. So they could like, oh, okay, I want to overdrive it so it sounds more metal, and then I'm going to put some chorus on it, and they start adding up these effects to create a very unique sound. So in the same way, in your digital audio workstation, you will add effects down the chain to create a unique sound. So what are some of these tools? Well, some common ones are reverb, which is a simulation of space, the reflections of a room, which is different than echo. Echo is just it coming back, but a reverb actually simulates timing and room sizes. It's very useful, especially when you're doing something that's more like baked into like a 2D audio or ambisonics. Then you have gates, which is the audio will be cut off if it's too quiet. It won't start unless it gets loud enough. You have compression, which is taking a very dynamic waveform and squishing it down so it's more consistent. But there's also things you can do with compression where you can add a spike of volume, which is very common when you're mixing drums. You can add a bit of punch to a very weak-sounding drum, like a snare or a kick. Chorus, which is a duplication of the sounds, and then you detune them a little bit to add a largeness to an instrument, which you can also do the sound effects. So you can kind of see where I'm going here. Distortion. You distort things. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And I'm actually, in an example, you'll see me using amplification, distortion type stuff from what I did in Submerged. So that being said, this is a lot, and there's a lot of knobs and a lot of words being said. Don't expect to understand these tools at all, but I would challenge you to try and play with them and see what the knobs do and see how they affect everything. And that's actually a bit of the playfulness of it. So the next I'm going to just show you some stuff I have in Logic. A lot of these examples are from a game I worked on last year, an indie game, which you play as like a cell, you're microscopic in a body. So, but there's also some examples from Submerged 2 that you will see. So here we go.
Welcome to Besseline, Doctor. Welcome to Besseline, Doctor.
All right. So, you could see that, like, okay, a lot of Foley in that. The first example was me just using my microphone, and I actually got my hands wet and try to make sound effects of like squishiness with just putting my hands together, and it actually came out really good. But doing like my own Foley of my voice to be like ooh ah ooh for when you're getting hurt, and adding the effects to make it sound cuter and more like something that's inhuman. Same with like the child recording I had to do the same thing. And so I am my personal thing is way behind because there was 2 slides. But here's like a thing that you may have noticed in this is I created a variety of recordings, and that's because you will make your recordings and you will be like, I don't like this at all. So you go and you get a lot of assets, and you can pick what you choose from. Another thing is that, especially in games, you really need to have variation, and I'll show in a future video, which you'll see some of the Fmod projects from that game that I worked on, how I created some variation and used all those assets. But another thing, as you can see that I did, is I used layers. So like on the submerged monster, like I had to do some like weird clipping to get it long enough, and by itself it didn't sound very good. You could hear the loop, but combined together, it really hit it well. But on top of that, having all those layers made the monster sound that much cooler. So like having the sound of the alligator, I guess it was purring, and like the lion roars and other sounds that a lot of them I got off like freesound.org to just make them sound much better, and I time stretched them, added effects. It made, I think a lot of people were scared of that monster. But on top of that, you can Cyan's voice lines that he used for his character were all through a character. You never saw them; they were all spoken through a military radio. So how does that sound like? Well, it's going to be lo-fi. There's going to be a lot of noise, and so I had like radio recordings behind it. But I also took the EQ, the equalizer, which controls the actual like pitches around the sounds. And I shrunk it down just to be the center, because radios they don't want to use more than they have to, so they only focus on like the speaking frequencies. And then I added a distortion, so I amplified it, and when I layered it with the existing radio sound, it sounded like a noisy radio. And funny enough, there were some frequencies that were in that recording that you couldn't hear, but once I added my effects, added to the lo-fi-ness, and sitting there, I'm just like, well, in any other situation, this would be a problem, but this actual situation is good. This is because it's supposed to sound like a bad walkie-talkie radio. So you use layers, but the great use of the effects is you are really changing the character of your sounds. So just because what you record and what you have sound a certain way, they're not going to end the same certain way. They're going to change character. So it's moving on to the next slide. I'm going to make a point about that. I have to like click these twice. Okay, so implementation. So you can have your mono, stereo, ambisonic assets. And us working in VR, we're going to overwhelmingly use mono assets. And that's because we're going to be using spatialization most of the time. You'll sometimes use stereo assets, though they're not as ideal. Well, I've actually taken some stereo assets in and played with them. If you have like really realistic recorded like orchestral music, it sounds just wrong in VR. It is like most like pop music sounds like, okay, it's passable, but like you have something that actually is based on like strong reality roots and you put it in stereo in VR, it sounds wrong. There's also ambisonic assets, which are great, but they don't really work so well in VR. They work great in 3D video. Ambisonic assets are your, so you think stereo is having 2 ambisonics are in the sense stereo, but you have more than 2 channels, and they're also locked in rotation. So if you have a sound effect that is here, and you turn your head, it is now it's still over here. So ambisonic assets are really cool. They are a little bit too strong for me. I haven't been able to really make good ambisonic assets. I know that Kid Cuisine has gone and recorded ambisonic stuff and put them in VRChat, and I can't figure this out. He's really smart, so he has that going for them. But mostly mono assets. If you import stereo assets into Unity and you use them spatialized, you're going to have problems. They're going to only use 1 channel. So either force them to mono or just directly import mono assets. And next biggest thing is, and this is especially in VR, is you're going to have proper spatialization as well as location. And I think people understand this pretty well, but I'm still going to make a point of it. The most realistic spatialization is going to be your logarithmic, and I love how it sounds. And you're going to have to also put things in the right spot. So when you have something like an NPC that's speaking, their voice should come out of their mouth. But being said, we're dealing with games, and things aren't always practical when they're realistic. So a logarithmic curve, when you get far enough away from it, you quickly can't hear it anymore. And if you need someone to hear something, don't use a logarithmic curve. You probably might want to use a linear curve. Linear curves aren't realistic, but damn, you can hear them. You can also do a custom curve. That being said, if you're in VRChat and you are, I recommend using the spatial audio source. And I also recommend using the audio. You want to use the audio source curve, because unfortunately the spatial audio source, its curves and its volume and everything don't reflect an editor, and you're going to be iterating an editor a lot. Cyan Emulator recently did some implementations, my understanding, to account for that. But it's still not that great. If I believe there's cannies for this, but if there was just ways to control the spatial audio source the same way we can control the audio curve, or just copy it and still have all the niceness of the spatial audio source, I would be very happy. I'd be a happy clam. But yeah, another thing is the gain is also kind of a black box, so I recommend keeping it at default. And if anything's too quiet or too loud, pop it into Audacity and amplify it, and then put it back in, and go with that. And then the final point is that when you're actually putting your sounds in here, you want a mix of intentions. So real isn't always great, but you always want to have an intention when you mix. What you have to understand and decide what people need to hear, what type of world you're making with your sounds. And if you don't have intention, things kind of get lost. So always be mindful of how you mix things and how loud they are. You don't want to have it blow people's ears out when you have their volume at 100%. You won't want it to be too quiet at 75% or 100%. So go 100%. Never want to blow people's ears out. And stylized mixing is fine. Realistic mixing is fine, but always have a purpose for why it's mixed. And that's especially in games where everything is not in service of the art form, but in service of the mechanic. So I'm going to go back to a video. This is going to show some Fmod stuff. It's also going to show some demos in Unity that I did. For those who remember my squeaky footsteps, you'll see that here. But it's just the fun stuff that you can see when it comes to variation and spatialization, and as well as twisting sounds to be used for new purposes. Honestly, I kept the noise maker one there with the trumpet sound just for fun. That was just a fun sound effect and fun thing. But yeah, variation is incredibly important. I put that a ton in these demos. Try to change the pitch. So if you're working in Udon, great news. You can just go and just call like, hey, pitch equals this range, if like random. It's simple. Same with volume. And you can also just like, okay, I'm gonna do a play one shot, but I'm gonna like randomly pick between like an array of like clips and boom. Like so in the Fmod examples, I have like a multi-timbral. I don't remember if that's the right name, but it's like there's multiple sound effects and it just picks one randomly. And you can do that in like Udon. It's not hard. I have like prefabs, and I'm not really plugging them because they're kind of broken because I messed up like my using namespace stuff. But like if you go and import them and like fix that, boom, you have like I can put in multiple sound effects and multiple audio sources and randomize them throughout the world. So variety is so important, especially when you're dealing with a lot of like noisy stuff and like repetitive stuff, like the footsteps. Even though it's like one sound effect, it's I made sure that hey, this is going to be randomized in how on its pitches, but also its volume, so it doesn't sound ear grating the same. But you can see with like my seagull white box thing, spatialization does create a sense of space. Like you can hear it and you can understand. Oh, I am like this windy place and there's seagulls nearby. Maybe I'm at the ocean. I understand where I am by just how it sounds. And just like in that previous example of from Half-Life Alyx, you understand just by listening. You're in a city. There are alien machines. There are birds about. You understand where you are just by hearing it. And it so greatly informs the type of world you're in. But in my last example, you can see I have this recording. I have like my crank sound, and that's like not unchanged. But I also did Foley, and I took a GameCube controller, and I just went to try and get the sound effects. And I got a mic nice and close. And after like a few minutes of trying, I got something sounding clean, and I got a nice bit in there, and I put it into Unity, and I went, okay, pitch, shift it down. It becomes a whole lot slower. Suddenly it becomes a crank sound for this gate. So even though we are done working in our DAW, we're not done actually twisting the assets that we have. We can randomize the spatialization. We can get so much out of just a couple assets. We can get so much out of just reusing stuff at different pitches. Like if there's any takeaway, get creative. Don't follow rules. Just do. So, that being said, takeaways. Variety. So much variety. And then you have your spatializations, and it creates a sense of space. And I just said these things just now, but please remember them because these are the most important things when it comes to sound design. And then the last is twisting assets. Get creative. One of my favorite examples, like from like the father of sound design, Ben Burt. If you've seen a Star Wars movie, you've heard his work. Incredible sound designer. He's like, okay, I'm in the middle of the desert in like Central California. I need to make a sound effect for a laser gun. I don't have much. What do I do? Hey, let's go. And there's like this metal wire thing from a electrical pole. We get the microphones on. Pew! Pew! Take that takeaway. Go hit stuff. Please hit stuff. I'm begging you. But yeah, sound is valuable. It is valuable. The tools and the variety of approaches you create an accessible art form. And creativity and unity are the core of creating sound effects. And implementation doesn't just mean putting in sounds. And I just realized that I skipped slides and I had in my slide the one from before. So I was like, hey, did I write this twice? But yeah. Please, don't skip out on putting sound effects in your worlds because it is important. Visuals are important, and please don't skip out on those either. But you need to have the remaining 20% because your ears are so easy to trick. And variety, the variety approach is accessible. You can just download Audacity for free. You can download Reaper for free and try it out and mess with stuff and edit stuff around and use the plugins that are built in. You can download free plugins off the internet and work with stuff. And I know you all are creative people. You guys make worlds in VR for God's sake. That's so awesome. And so, here's another tool set for you to make cool stuff. And then put it in your stuff and work with it. Implement it in such creative ways. So, with that being said, that is the end of my talk, and I am going to open up the floor to questions. Is there something I need to press orals or?
No need. Everything should be good.
All right.
Q&A.
Yeah. I have according to my thing here, I have 5 minutes. So, yep.
You talked about modifiers. I guess I started using Audition. I did not see that in it. Is it specifically for a software?
So I use that as a comparison. But I think we were in a Discord call a while back, and I showed you EQ.
Yeah.
And those are plugins. And so if in the sense of audio, those are called plugins. You basically affect the audio the same way a modifier affects a mesh. And boom, you have a different your sound is different. So that is mostly the comparison. You were using an equalizer, but there's a ton of different options, and you can there's companies that just make standalone plugins to use with anything that you're using. So they're standardized, so you don't always have to buy a certain software to use a certain plugin, if that answers your question.
Can Audition do that? Does it have a plugin? Do you know?
That is a good question. If it supports VSTs, then yes. If it supports, yeah.
I don't think Audition supports VSTs. No.
Do you know what format they support?
I do not know, but I don't think you can use actual synthesizers within Audition. It's mostly for Foley work and sound effect stuff for video production.
Yeah. Okay.
Too bad.
Reaper does.
Reaper does. Reaper's good. FL Studio's good.
Do you have any recommendations for paid libraries?
So, actually, there was a company that I worked for called the AIXR, and they gave me access to a really great library, and it was called Elements Envato Elements. There was really a lot of really great stuff in there, so I would recommend looking into that. Legends used a really good library for when he did stuff for Devouring, and I don't remember the name of it, so I would also ask him. He might impart some good knowledge on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry if I've already asked this before, and because I honestly don't remember, but this is all I could think about when you were talking about synthesis sound design. Have you played with Vital yet?
No, I haven't, but I'll take that as a recommendation to play with it.
Please, for the love of God, go play with Vital. After you're done with December Crunch, go play with Vital. It is absolutely super fun. Everybody go play with Vital. Go download it. It's free.
Go play with Vital.
It's the new serum. It's the new serum, but it's free. So, I mean, there you go.
No idea what serum
Hey.
Post a link somewhere.
So my question is, when I've been doing sound effects, I did a lot of sound effects for little ones for the Devouring and other projects. One of the biggest issues I have is changing pitch and timing. So you'll get a bell from Freesound that goes for 10 seconds. I need it to end at 2 seconds and making it sound how making that realistic, or as well as taking something and pitching it up or down without it sounding robotic. And I'm using Audacity, so I'm wondering if there's better tools for using that and what you suggest.
So that is actually a really tough question because if you get something, that's one of the problems with like libraries is you don't necessarily know the actual like fidelity of what you're getting. And I'm not really one who's a stickler for fidelity, but when it comes to actually working with assets, you want to get as high resolution fidelity as possible because of this reason. When you time stretch stuff and you have stuff that is like 44.1 kilohertz, not too high quality, it quickly starts to get robotic. But the higher quality of recording will fix that. But there's other things you can do. You can start like cutting stuff up together in Audacity or Reaper or whatever you're using, and it becomes kind of a chore. So that's essentially where having like good libraries and good stuff that you've paid for come in handy, because having something that is 96 kilohertz, very high quality, way overkill for games. You work at it and you then finish editing it, and you put it into a 44.1 kilohertz asset or 48 kilohertz asset. That'll help a lot. So it's not really an easy solution to fix that, but it's basically like, besides like get better assets, or just maybe see if you can record something yourself if you really can't find something. But it's kind of a non-answer. I'm sorry, Fiona.
But no, actually, that's actually a good question because I wasn't really aware that the hertz of recording was something that mattered. So that's a good tip.
Yeah. All right. Yep.
What was I gonna say? Shit. Great. I wanted to make one comment. You were talking about gear, and I think a really good recommendation is something that I personally have. It's a little camera recorder from Zoom, which is an audio production company.
Yes.
But it has the stereo microphones. You can use it as a lavalier mic recorder. You can plug it into your computer, use it as a webcam, and it's only like $200. So it's basically like a GoPro with a better microphone. So it would be a really good, cheap field recorder. Other thing I wanted to say, in the video industry, they often say that audio is 50% of what the audience is experiencing. And I think that's pretty much applicable when it comes to video games as well. So it's important.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
Okay.
Quote.
So, okay, so you were talking about like audio and like doing commissions and whatnot, or like getting paid for it earlier. How would you go about promoting yourself with your audio?
That's a good question because it's really hard, and I never really see people actually promote themselves. It's always really best through like word of mouth and just like being just networking. That is like the honest to goodness like the best way as like an audio person to get gigs, because we're incredibly annoying. We are so annoying. There's just a joke where like this audio positions apply, and like especially composers will apply to gigs for companies that are like shipping to games. Like, hey, can I write the music for like the new Immortals Phoenix Rising? It's like the game is shipping, like we're printing it. You can't write music for it. Super annoying. So having just networking is really like the best way to promote yourself as a sound designer and a composer. And also having a great reel. Great reels help. You can just be like, hey, this is my reel. Boom. Hey, you're pretty good. Is there any more questions? I'm kind of like, I bet Orals is going to stop me. So, there.
If we don't have any more questions, we're gonna take a break until Georgia's talk. So like 5 minutes or so, and then Georgia will start.